Great. In this area? Oh, okay, it's more visible. Got it. Let a few more people come in. Cool. So I'm going to get started here. I'm Cameron Robertson. I'm one of the folks working on Kong. I have a background in manufacturing products and secure products and IoT. Played with crypto a little bit, and this is a project that we've been working on which really brings the two together. And I'll explain a little bit about why we're doing it. So one of the things a lot of folks at the conference have been talking about is the adoption curve and where Ethereum is on the adoption curve. I think it's a really fascinating topic because when we first started looking into this in 2018, there were far fewer users actually owning their own wallets, using dApps, minting crypto assets. But this data point, which is of course on Bitcoin, not Ethereum, seems to indicate that we're somewhere around 1997 internet, which is great. There's a lot of people who are using crypto assets, they're buying them, selling them, but there's really one huge concern that we have with this, and that is that exchanges are the default way that people interact with crypto. A lot of users who are not savvy enough to set up their own wallets, whether they're hardware or in the browser, buy crypto on exchanges and they keep it there. So effectively, they're not participating in the greater ecosystem. They're not setting up dApps, and they're not holding their own keys, most importantly. And of course, when people don't hold their own keys, really bad things happen. If Mt. Gox is one of the things I remember. A lot of friends who had Bitcoin early on in the 2013 days lost all of their funds when Mt. Gox was hacked. And I think relative to all the crypto market at that time, that is still one of the biggest hacks. And it influences space. And so the big concern we have is if people are not holding their own crypto and holding their own key material, then that's really problematic. So we start off this project with the question, what if crypto could be more like cash? And that might seem sort of like a throwback. The whole idea of digital money is we're getting away from physical money. Why would we want to bring it back to this antiquated form? But one of the things we realized is that cash has a lot of tremendous benefits. Everybody, no matter the age they are, whether they're a kid or really old, knows how to use cash. Cash has a printed face value, so you know exactly how much it's worth. If you destroy cash or you lose it, the value is gone. And in general, you don't have these high variable transaction costs. A lot of people say there are no transaction costs with cash. That's not true. There are transaction costs to hold cash. It's fairly expensive for stores to deal with it. So broadly, off to the side here. So broadly, we think that cash is a pretty useful way to think about crypto. And that's how we approached this problem around 2019. When we thought about this in our background in manufacturing hardware, we looked at existing solutions. And one of the common existing solution is private keys that you print out on a printer. And it's great if you want to gift a private key or something to a family member. You can give them a QR code. They can pull that, and they're set. But one of the problems with this is, obviously, they can't then go and spend that private key with someone else because they can steal the funds from it. And another problem is that we heard from a lot of people who had solutions like this gifted to them is they lose it. It's not obvious that it's worth something, and it doesn't feel like it has value. So printed private keys just don't really work for transmissibility, and nor do they have this sense of value to them. The next one was hardware wallets. Hardware wallets are great. They take your keys away from your computer, which has a larger attack surface. So your hardware wallet, in theory, has a smaller attack surface. But in terms of something like cash, the problem with hardware wallets is they're really expensive. They're fairly complex. They have a lot of code running on them. They need to support screens and buttons and communications via USB with your computer. And when you add complexity, you add attack surface. So you increase the likelihood that someone can pull the keys off of a hardware wallet maliciously. And of course, if we want to distribute these things in the millions, again, it's just very costly to do that. The last one is this thing called a Java card. a Java card is effectively something like you have in your wallet. The thing about Java cards is that they have a lot of attack vectors to them. So they're really useful because they're programmable, but unfortunately, there's many, many different papers that have been written by security researchers on how to get the keys out of Java cards. They're really useful for other cases where you don't have to pass the Java card on to somebody else, as say a hardware wallet. But in the case of mimicking cash, as people who've been in the hardware business for a while, we didn't really like the idea of using Java cards. And so what it really boils down to is trust in physical crypto means trust in the keys. The keys allow you to sign proof of ownership. They allow you to transfer the asset. And so how you store the keys matters a huge amount. So the product that we developed and we showed off at DevCon in 2019 is Kong. It is a physical crypto cash note. It looks and feels like money. It has a printed denomination on it, as I mentioned. It has a secure element chip on it, which stores and generates the private key material. And more interestingly, unlike a hardware wallet, the private key associated with this doesn't directly control the asset. But instead, it's proxied through a smart contract. The smart contract holds the asset, and it has certain sets of rules on when that asset can be retrieved. So in the case of cash, we didn't want to make this like a gift card where you could immediately pull the value off of it. Because if you go out there and you receive a euro note or a dollar bill, you have a great degree of confidence that you can take that to a bank and deposit it. And so in the case of Cash, in order to emulate that, to make it feel and work like money, we actually lock up the funds via a time lock in the contract. So these notes expire in 2022, which means until that point in time, you can spend them like cash, you can store them like cash, you can burn them, but you can actually, you cannot pull the digital Kong token off of it until that expiration date. So all these qualities we thought were really important. It was really great to get the product out there at the end of 2019 at DevCon. A few people saw it also at ECC3. But it was, we had a few challenges since then. And one additional thing to point out. So the key aspect of how we manage the keys versus, say, the Java cards and the hardware wallets is this specialized chip called a secure element. A lot of hardware wallets have secure elements in them, but they're only used to validate the firmware. They don't actually generate and store the key material. And the reason why secure elements are really important is because their functions are encoded in hardware effectively as opposed to software. And that means they're not upgradable and they're not malleable. And so in our case, every Kong Cash note actually self-generates its own ECDSA key pair. And that private key is never accessible. And that's why we also use the smart contract, because since we can never sweep the keys off of it, you need to have the smart contract be able to release it upon signatures from the chip. And that's the only thing it can do effectively is generate signatures. And so in terms of the structure of how a Kong note looks, you effectively have the chip here, which is the signer. You have the smart contract in between. We've now done a few different iterations of what the smart contract looks like, but effectively it just needs to be able to check the pub key. And then the one thing that's really important to note here is these chips, unfortunately, off the shelf today do not support the native ECDSA key type in Bitcoin or Ethereum, but rather they support the NIST-backed standard P256. And all that means is we have this translation problem where we can't use these built-in functions in Ethereum, and we had to write this very expensive contract to be able to process these signatures. And that's using the P256 elliptic curve. So since we announced this product and we got it out there, obviously a lot of things have happened. At the beginning it was really tough because we have a physical product and we show it off to people and we bring it to conferences, and obviously all of that was canceled. High gas prices. So when we first developed Kong in 2019, we were fairly new to Ethereum. And at that point in time, both Ethereum and gas were very cheap. So each Kong note cost us, I think it was around 25 cents to deploy. But fast forward to DeFi summer, and our costs started to spike beyond like $10 and then $50 per note and $100, and it just wasn't viable. So we had to totally rewrite how we manage our contracts, and that took a little time to figure out because we're not we're hardware people, not really Ethereum developers, and took us a little bit of a learning curve. And then lastly, the thing that we're still facing today is chip shortages. So once we had resolved our smart contract issues, we started to run out of chips. And that's obviously impacting everyone. Luckily, we have a source of some chips, and we've been exploring new options, but it has been a little bit challenging since then. Of course, since then, the upside has been tremendous. Everybody knows what's been going on. Apart from DeFi, NFTs have been exploding. L2s are finally shipping, which helps us with our gas problems. And so we had a lot of confidence that even though we were facing these issues, it was interesting for us to keep building. The biggest sort of meta thing that we got from showing this off at DevCon and ECC was really that the notes were interesting, but other crypto assets were more interesting. So by that I mean getting physical crypto assets, whether they're NFTs or property or collectibles, and using our chips for that purpose were really, really interesting to a lot of different people out there. And folks came out and started asking us for the chips, and we decided to start exploring a few of these things. So since then, we realized that Kong is really only the tip of the iceberg. And I'm super excited to say that at this point in time, between Kong notes and additional chips, we've shipped 10,000 of these, what we call silos. And a silo is just our term for a silicon lock contract, so any physical crypto asset. So we've been able to deploy a lot of these, and I just want to talk about where we're going today with that and how we're directing from there. So our conclusion from talking to a bunch of customers and learning from everyone out there is basically a lot of people are super skeptical about crypto, and then they're super skeptical about NFTs, and then they're like, yeah, everybody's just going to be in the metaverse consuming this stuff. That's it. Like, we're just going to be plugged in all the time. But in reality, our conclusion is that, yes, the metaverse exists, and we're going to access it in online places, but it's also going to be ubiquitous around us. As in, objects around us will also be objects that will participate in the metaverse. And the most important thing to be able to do that in our minds is making sure that those objects have a really strong way to store their key materials so you can identify them on chain. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that with a few of the early folks who've worked with Kong. So what we're launching today is what we're calling Kongland, and it's basically an opportunity for anyone else out there to come build using this chip technology. So if you have physical projects that you want to work on, Kongland is effectively a DAO of DAOs that's engaging with the community and shipping out different interesting stuff. We're calling it an experimental crypto state because Kongland in and of itself is not intended to be a DAO around some sort of protocol to begin with. We want to put the technology out there as a public good. One way to approach this is we're just one company selling these chips, but we'd rather engage with everybody and get the chips out there at cost for really interesting projects to scale the tech up. And there's a few interesting reasons why scale is important for us. And the end mission is that we think that physical user experiences, back to our Kong cash notes, are incredibly useful for individuals to onboard to crypto and be able to hold their own key material. So let's talk a little bit about what a Kongland DAO looks like, and then a few examples. Basically, the idea is we're bringing in chips, ideas, other tokens, and then we're embedding them into fashion, merch, pieces of art, collectibles. Fairly simple, but the idea is, we want to be able to make things physical that are crypto. So the first and most amazing example project that we've been collaborating with is MetaFactory. MetaFactory is incredible, and they're doing just like insane stuff around merch. If you haven't heard of them, you need to check them out. But they realized very early on, before we did, that tokens and merch interacting together are really sort of the future of engaging entirely new customer bases, getting people attached to brands, curating different products in the market. And MetaFactory has also been like helping us along through this whole path of becoming a DAO effectively. So huge shout out to those guys. But one of the cool things, the reason I want to point this out, is a number of the original Metafactory goods have our chips in them. So the Metafactory Genesis bomber jacket here has them. And we've been working with them to build out experiences that, based on you scanning the chip in the jacket, are exclusive to you as the holder of the jacket at that point in time. And if you sell the jacket on to somebody else, maybe you no longer have access to those experiences. The next one is Mattereum. Mattereum has been working on real-world asset NFTs, and they've been in this space for a long time. What's really interesting about Mattereum is they also have a whole legal framework that they're designing, so that in the real world, how assets are managed are done so with both smart contracts and contracts written by lawyers. And so they have this really interesting framework, and they launched a few months back with these William Shatner Star Trek collectibles, and they embedded our Kong tags under the signature that Bill Shatner himself signed. So it's another example of these tags are giving authenticity, they're tracking the collectible, and the really cool thing is ultimately with some of the Mattereum stuff that you can actually pull those assets back into DeFi. You can say, okay, I have these Mattereum tagged assets, maybe it's a Shatner collectible, maybe it's a gold bar, maybe it's something else. If I can scan and validate it, that helps me then to actually use that as collateral in some sort of DeFi construction. So super excited to be working with them as well on this. Coming up is we do have a second version of Kong Notes. They're not actually going to be used, as the slide says, for stablecoins right away. They're for a different token altogether. And the reason I bring this up is we learned a lot in terms of sourcing chips and scaling up, and these Kong Notes are more resilient than the first generation Kong Notes. They're a little bit cheaper to manufacture. They have slightly different security guarantees, but we're super excited about those. Those are coming soon in the next few months. And they point towards something which we would like a Kong DAO to engage with the community on is a stablecoin physical crypto note. And there's a lot of reasons for this that I don't have time to get into in my talk, so hop into our Discord if you want to chat about making physical stablecoins. There's really, really cool ways to onboard people to DeFi using this kind of physical note, even if they have zero clue about private keys and crypto altogether. I mentioned one of the things about scale and why scale is important to us and why we want to make this a public good and get everybody on board. And that's because we actually took sort of a detour a couple years ago into the open chip world. And we basically were super concerned with how chips are manufactured, because even if you have really fantastic software that protects your keys and then really fantastic hardware that protects your keys, if the chips are manufactured in a way that's untrustworthy, you don't know who manufactured them, you don't know where, then someone can build an extra set of gates and they can steal your private keys. So the idea behind this is you might have a very secure chip design. Whether or not that actually gets implemented is a big question. There's a lot of open source tooling coming here. It's going to take a long time before we have truly open auditable chips. But our hope is that if we're all building a bunch of physical real world crypto assets out there, that we can source things in the millions, which is really what you need to design custom chips, and then open those up for all sorts of applications. Maybe not only silos, but also crypto wallets, laptops, smartphones, things like that. So this kind of reinforces, I like that this tweet is from 2019 because Balaji brought up that effectively in the future, key management is everything. And a lot of folks have now been saying, sign in with Ethereum, like today that's happening, like we know that's the case. So I think when I brought this up a year and a half ago, it was kind of like, well, maybe, but now everybody's really understanding the importance of how you manage your key material. And we think that, especially on your hardware, also how you manage your key material is really important. So the thing that we're launching today, that is a physical piece, which is how we're launching the Kongland DAO, is a Kong passport card. Basically, this is the same chip technology that we have on our Kong notes, instead in a card form factor. And we're launching this at Kong.land. The idea behind this is it's sort of an invite for everyone to buy what we're saying is citizenship to the Kongland DAO. It's also going to generate a sort of NFT DID, which you can either use pseudonymously You can take it off and sell it to somebody else. But we're kind of playing around with the idea of here's a physical crypto device that maybe at some point will let you into a crypto party because you can just tap it onto an NFC scanner, and because you have citizenship in Kongland DAO, you can be granted access. And again, this isn't something we want to keep exclusive to us. We'd really like to work with DID projects around UBI, about getting this technology out there at scale, because again, that lowers the cost for everybody. So we're launching this today. There's some tokens in a pool that you can purchase, and then they're going to be redeemable, I think, next month. And we'll be shipping out this physical card to you in redemption for that, along with the NFT. This is a preview of one of the NFTs. One of the things about Kong and the aesthetic of Kong is there's a lot of mystique that we built into it. We're focusing on classical statues for the NFTs, which are pretty fun. But yeah, a little bit of what I just explained there in terms of how we're approaching this. And also, we're finally moving on to Discord. We've been on Keybase for a couple of years, and not many people use Keybase anymore, so super easy to hop into Kong. So today's a shout out. If you want to learn more about this, or you're super interested in playing with the technology, or you're an artist or a builder, or you're super intrigued, hop into the Discord. Take a look at Kong.land, Kong.cash. I'll be around with my briefcase at the conference for the rest of the day. So if you want to take a look at Kong notes or have some ideas, let me know. Yeah. So again, this is what we want to do. We want to make crypto super usable. We want to let you hold your own keys. And Kongland is effectively the vehicle by which we're doing that. And we want to engage with everybody out there to do that. Thanks a lot. Do we have time for questions? Or? Oh, yep.
Thank you. Hi, Cameron. Great talk. So I actually am familiar with MetaFactory. I didn't know that Kong was like the technology that was used for their products. So I guess my question is like, what is the user journey? When someone gets the MetaFactory, there's a chip, and you mentioned that once, how does it get washed in the dryer? Like what happens to the chip if someone resells it? Like I want to know the full journey. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a really good question about the user journey of someone buying a MetaFactory product with the embedded chip in it. So thus far, it's only been a few of the high-end goods. It hasn't been every MetaFactory good. And we haven't really announced to all the users how that works today, because the user journey is something that we're still in progress on. We've talked about a lot of ideas around it. Right now, today, every person with one of these chips can scan them, and they can verify that it's a Kong authentic chip. But the next steps there are, we propose kind of a lot of ideas with MetaFactory on like, oh, we think that this might be interesting to build, or this might be interesting. But the really cool thing is MetaFactory has a lot of other really interesting ideas that I don't want to spoil in terms of how they're doing that. So it's kind of up to them. I would say, long story short, you can imagine it as you get the good, you scan it, and that may give you access to a digital asset right away that you're able to mint, or it may track the existence of other assets. It may be a place where they can immediately drop you additional things over time, because that's a big part of MetaFactory is getting the robot drops. So yeah, I realize that's sort of a vague answer to that. There's a lot of different aspects of what might happen there, but the out-of-box experience is you get the good, you scan it, and then you're brought into the MetaFactory digital experience right away. No, it is on the clothing. So it's mounted under the tag. The chip is washable. I realize that's the other part of your question. Yeah, so the first gen chips are limited washability, but they have been through some wash tests, but that's sort of a scaling problem. We can get them to be super washable, so yeah.
So, hello, a great presentation, thank you. So I wanted to ask that with the Kong notes, I guess there are two distinct things that you might want to do with them electronically. One is to verify that it's a genuine note, and the other is actually transact with it. So how do you, like, what's the user interface? Like, how do you tell the note what to do?
Yeah. So the interface is via NFC. So all the notes are inductively powered when you tap your phone to them. So there's no battery required. And through the process of you tapping your phone to them with the Kong app, you can also feed in a random number. And by feeding in a random number and knowing the public key, you can then verify it. So you can verify the authenticity. In terms of actually interacting with assets in the smart contract, we're actually having you sign recent block hashes. So we're saying, okay, if you want to claim this note, we want to see that you've signed a recent block hash of a certain height, because if someone else previously has signed a block hash, you don't want them to be able to claim it. So the claim mechanism is based around, let's sign recent information from the chain. And again, it's as simple as you tap the app, we feed that information in the chip, and we get a signature out. And a cool feature of the chip is that the one that we're using now, we can actually generate both external signatures from nonces that we feed into it, as well as signatures from data about the chip internal to itself. And those are two different distinct key pairs, and that gives us really a great capability to audit the chip and say, okay, here's the chip's configuration signed by the chip by this key, which by design can only sign internal data. So there's additional capabilities there. One of the other things that we haven't really used also is we have some keys which are set to expire. So there's one key that you can only use, I believe it's 5 times on the chip in total, and then it will refuse to sign additional data. So that gives you some interesting properties around claiming assets. But yeah, the UX is very simple. You tap on it, iOS or Android, using the Kong mobile app. We get signatures out, and we use those in the smart contract.
Thank you.
Cool. I think that's it. Well, thanks a lot, and find me with the briefcase if you want to take a look.